This evening, we continue in words from Isaiah about how God is with us, how our Emmanuel is with us, and how the promises of Isaiah, the prophecies of Isaiah, point us to Jesus, to his arrival, and to his second coming. There's been war in Ukraine now for 287 days, which is longer than I think many of us probably imagined. Longer than I imagined when that first broke out 3/4 of a year ago, or however long. I guess it was February, right? I figured it would probably be wrapped up by, I don't know, sometime maybe in March. I mean, just the geographic size and the population of the two nations, and comparing their military weaponry and the backing that they probably had, it's fairly simple math. This isn't going to take very long. The interesting thing, though, I looked up to, figure out which day it was. I have that sometimes on a news headline that I see as I scroll news headlines on my phone, but I didn't have the days, so I just, quick search, and it actually identified that this conflict has been going on since 2014. So it depends on what you mark as the start time for it. What's the start time for war? Well, I don't know. Goes back till Cain and Abel. Goes back a long, long time, and there's been, how many days in the history of the world when there hasn't been some kind of conflict. The battles between Russia and Ukraine aren't the only ones in the world going on right now. Another quick search demonstrated that Myanmar has been in a significant conflict and more than 10,000 casualties this calendar year. Other nations such as Afghanistan, Burkina Faso, Colombia, Ethiopia, Iraq, Mali, Sudan, Syria, and so on, still having conflict. Some of it's the incursion of terrorists. Some of it is other kinds of conflicts, internal or external. Lots of casualties around the world because peace gets lost. Peace gets lost so easily, fractured so quickly, it seems. I was pointed to a Laurel and Hardy film from 1925. Laurel and Hardy, silent actors, at least in the 20s, when they made this film. It's on YouTube. You can find it. Just to do a search for Laurel and Hardy, Big Business. 1925 film. It shows them as door-to-door Christmas tree salesmen. And it makes the point that they're doing this in California. I'm not sure why. In 1925, they wanted to point that out, but they did. It's on one of the, card things that become part of the film. And so they are in a truck, Model T or whatever, Ford, and they've got all these Christmas trees in the back of it, and they're going door to door. Anybody remember it? Have you seen it? All right, I can make it up and you won't know. Just kidding. I'll tell you what the story is like. It's actually pretty fast. It's like 18 minutes, and it's fun. So just go home tonight and watch the whole thing. You have time. So they pull up to a house, and they go up, and the homeowner doesn't want a Christmas tree. And so one of them, and I can never remember which one's Laurel and which one's Hardy. I think Laurel's the skinny guy, but I'm not positive. So he says, and they show on the screen what they're saying, right? The dialogue. And so the not quite as skinny gentleman says, oh, you need to have personality. Well, she didn't buy from him either. The door closes. They take the tree, go back to the truck, put it in the truck, drive just around the corner, take the tree back out of the truck, and walk up the sidewalk to a porch that's like literally around the corner. Like they could have just walked faster. Anyway, it's part of the fun. They knock on the door or ring the doorbell, and a man comes to the door, and he's not interested in a tree. And he's got a rather salty disposition, and he shuts the door, and they go to leave, and the tree is stuck in the door. A branch of the tree is stuck in the door, so they ring the doorbell again. They explain what happened. He gets angry, shuts the door really quick, and the tree's still stuck in the door. Ring the doorbell again. Pull the tree away from the door. Turn around, he shuts the door behind them, and Laurel's coat is stuck in the door. Ring the doorbell again. The man comes out and he's shaking his fist. They take the coat back out, and somehow the tree gets stuck in the door. So like the 5th time that this is happening. They finally get the tree away from the house. They leave from the house. They go back to the truck, and Laurel thinks, I've got an idea. Goes back to the same. Can we take your order for next year? The man says something, goes back in the house. Laurel turns to Hardy, says, we have a sale. Hardy brings the tree right back up to the same porch. The man comes out of his house with lopping shears, cuts the tree in 3 pieces, and takes it and chucks it out on the lawn. Well, now at this point, these 2 men are perplexed. What are we going to do? But they're also upset, All right, man shuts the door. Laurel takes out his pocket knife, pops the address numbers off the stucco of the man's house and throws them down, starts cutting away at his door frame. The man sees it happening, opens up his door just about the time Laurel takes that piece he cut off and snaps it in half and throws it down. So the man takes Hardy's pocket watch out of his pocket, looks at it, listens to it, throws it on the ground and stomps on it, slams the door. So out comes the doorbell. Chop that wire, throw that down. The man comes back out again. Now it's on, right? He starts to call the police. They cut his telephone wire, take his phone out of his hand and throw that down. He pulls a pair of scissors out and cuts Hardy's shirt, cuts his tie off, slams the door again. They turn his hose on him. As he opens the door, the hose sprays into his face, so he comes running down, chasing these 2 guys as they go back to the truck. And then he stands in front of their truck and pulls off a headlight and throws it through their windshield. They go back to the house, pull off his outside light, throw it through the window. Isn't this how things happen sometimes? They started off selling Christmas trees to celebrate the birth of Jesus. Escalation. And on it goes. They end up destroying his house, and he destroys their truck. An eye for an eye and a tooth for the tooth wins the day. Instead of Merry Christmas, right? Most wars start small. General Sherman was right. War is hell. Someone else said this: war never decides who's right, only who's left. Which I think is a good play on words and also very accurate. Because skirmish is met with escalation, and not just between nations. It also happens in between people, in between families, and there's famous ones, the Hatfields and McCoys. This is Barb Hatfield, Harper. I noticed there are no McCoys in the room, so apparently your side won. Even at Christmas time, right? Family gatherings can sometimes become sources of conflict. The celebrations of the birth of Jesus can not always be peaceful. I learned this too. At least somewhere around 20 years ago in Guatemala, every Christmas, 5 to 10 people were injured or killed by bullets falling from the sky, because people would go outside, take out their firearm, fire it in the air in celebration. Well, these bullets go somewhere. Remember that song, "What goes up must come down." And it can come down sometimes where there are people. And so the police would urge the people of Guatemala not to do that anymore. It's unsettling. That's how people would celebrate, to fire weapons into the air, celebrating the Prince of Peace. Other times, not just a gradual escalation, but sometimes we're thrust into conflict, right? And we remember this date from 1941. It's December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. Well, looking at our prophet's words in chapter 11, Isaiah promised peace. Isaiah's prophecy was aimed initially at Judah and Jerusalem, the southern kingdom of the divided people of God. Israel, which had been one kingdom, had been divided. And by the time Isaiah came along, Israel was either already or was on their way out into exile by the Assyrians. And Judah, the southern kingdom, which is where he was, wasn't too far behind. But the day would be coming, Isaiah promised, when God's people would be restored from their impending captivity to Babylon and from division, the second part of our reading, which is probably less familiar. Kevin, thanks for working through those names. But Ephraim and Judah, Ephraim is another name for the northern kingdom of Israel. Ephraim and Judah had been divided, and embedded in there was words about jealousy and conflict between those two, and even that would be resolved and restored. And the people of God would be brought from the places where they'd been taken, not just to Assyria, and for the people of Judah, not just to their impending captivity in Babylon, but from all over. From the scattered places that they had gone, they would be gathered back together. And we know that they did return from Babylon because of the release from Persia, or the Persians allowed. So the people of Judah did eventually return. The temple was rebuilt, the city of Jerusalem was restored, but even that peace didn't last. Another round of captors came. So we have to look at Isaiah's prophecy not just in a short term for Judah and Jerusalem, but in a longer term. A shoot would come from Jesse. A shoot from a stump. Maybe you've seen that in the woods or in your yard. You ever cut off a tree and had it keep growing, stubborn tree? I've seen that a lot of times. We have a pear tree in our yard, and it's the kind that the pear part of it is grafted onto something else. Not even sure what it is. Could be a wild pear, but it's at least something compatible. And you can tell because there's a line at the bottom where the pear tree starts growing up, and the trunk below that, the stump part looks different. The bark looks a little bit different. So it was grafted a long, long time ago. And that's how a lot of times fruit trees are grown, because the wild rootstock is better than the fruit tree roots would be. So the trees can last longer, they produce better, et cetera, et cetera. But out the side of that bottom part, every few months, I have to go out there with some clippers and cut off all these little shoots that are growing up because, well, the wild root part is like, how come we're supporting that guy, right? We're going to grow our own stuff coming out of here. The shoot that comes up from the stump, that which was cut off, which looked completely dead, is the one who was cut to come, the stump of Jesse, the descendant of David, the one who is promised, who is going to bring about this restoration. Not the one for Judah and Jerusalem coming back from exile, but something much more significant. That's the promise that Isaiah is really pointing to. The Spirit of the Lord would be on him. In verse 3 or 2, it tells us the spirit of wisdom and understanding, of counsel and might, of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. Words that Jesus read from a scroll one time. That the Spirit of the Lord would be on him. At least similar words are what Jesus read when he was in his hometown of Nazareth. The next verse is words of judgment, but then of peace. Now, sometimes peace requires that a battle is fought. Peace doesn't just show up, right? It requires that there's something that allows for that peace. Early Christians didn't engage in war. And conscientious objectors have come around every time there has been armed conflict. But sometimes the oppressor just has to be stopped. Sometimes Even the people of God are needed to step into that gap, to put on the uniform or the armor, to take up weapons, because those who would oppress the weak, those who would invade, those who would force their will on others need to be held accountable, need to be stopped. And so sometimes we have to fight those battles. And Jesus, the one who was to come, certainly fought a battle on our behalf. His was an invasion of divine love into this war-torn world. The one who was promised, who would bring about all of this change, brought it about by laying down his life. And true peace is yet to come. True lasting peace is yet to come, and that will involve peace in creation. Isaiah paints this interesting picture at starting at verse 6, going into verse 9. The wolf shall lie down with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the young goat. These are animals that eat each other. The calf and the lion and the fattened calf together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze. Okay, the cow grazes. We know that. A bear? I mean, some bears eat berries. So there are the species of bears that we can imagine doing that, but I don't know, grizzlies? Those bears that catch the fish and they're, stand in the middle of the river, and the salmon that are jumping just caught in the bear's mouth. No, he's going to eat grass. The lion. Okay, now hold on. We know what lions eat, right? The lion, the pride of lions, the women go do the hunting, right? And then with his great big hairdo, the male lion shows up and has dinner. And it's often the gazelle or the other animal that they, picked off, chasing it through the high grass in the savannah. This is what we picture. This is what National Geographic will put on the screen. How this works. We understand this. We can picture this. Those teeth that they have, these are not teeth for chewing vegetation. They're the tearing kinds of teeth. And yet the word says this, that the lion shall eat straw like the ox. Ox teeth, much more suited. Maybe the lion's going to have some dental work done. We don't know. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra. Not the child of any mom I've ever known would be allowed to do that. And the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. And this is what it goes on to say in verse 9. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Full of the knowledge of the Lord. That's really what it takes. The intervention of God to reverse how creation works now. To change how animals have instincts. And that requires the intervention of God himself. There'll be peace in creation, even between animals, between one and another, and a full restoration of the remnant restored. At the second coming of Jesus will come the full reality of peace. God's people will be restored in a way that I don't even think we can fully grasp and comprehend. The restoration of how God had in mind for creation to work, for life to be, for people to interact with both him and with one another. We're going back to Eden. When Jesus comes back, and it's going to look a whole lot like the garden, where people could walk and talk with God, where the relationship with God wouldn't be broken by our sinfulness, and where a relationship with one another wouldn't be disrupted by our same sinful attitudes and actions. Our selfishness that we so often display, and the ways that selfishness and sinfulness turns into conflict, and those conflicts can linger and even grow. And all that gets undone and restored to the point where we can have this relationship with God that is perfect, and a relationship with other people that won't be undone, that won't be disrupted, that will be peace. There was a song some years ago, "Let There Be Peace on Earth." It's probably in the 70s or so, maybe 60s, I'm not sure. But do you remember it? Let there be peace on earth. And let it begin with me. Make peace. Make peace. There's a story told of an older man, like a grandpa age kind of man, and he sees some kids, 6 and 7 years old, and they're playing. He says to him, what are you doing? What are you playing? Oh, we're playing war. He says to him, why don't you play peace instead? So these 6 and 7-year-olds get their heads together and they have a conversation. A couple minutes goes by and they say, we don't know how. We don't know how. And it's true, we don't know how. We don't know how to create peace, not in ourselves, not from our power, not from our strength. But we can do what's in our power. There's wisdom on a bumper sticker, and maybe you've seen one similar, a t-shirt or something. I tried to find the origin of this and I couldn't find it. It's been around for quite a while. No Jesus, no peace. No Jesus, no peace. If you've seen it, you know that it sounds the same. But the words are very different. No, N-O, Jesus, means no peace. No Jesus. Not just in your head, but in your heart and in your life. K-N-O-W, Jesus, and you will know peace. That's where our peace is found, in the one who Isaiah promised, the one who was born according to those promises, the one in whom we can find peace. In the middle of this busy season, we can be at peace. When someone cuts you off in traffic, be at peace. When there's tension, we can be at peace in Christ. When there's bad news, we can find our peace in Jesus. When there's a battle inside, and sometimes there is, and sometimes it rages, and sometimes it wakes us up in the night, and sometimes it's really hard, but in Jesus, we can still have peace. Find peace in the one who came to bring peace. The end of our gospel reading, the reason it was chosen, this words of John the Baptist's father, who, after his son is named and everything, then prophesies about him. And the very tail end of it, speaking about his son, is that he's going to prepare the way for the one who is to come. And it goes on to end with, to guide our feet into the way of peace. Some parts of that, it's hard to decide if he's talking about John or if he's already moved on to Jesus. They were a team, so it's okay. Because our way of peace that we find is the way of Christ. May the Prince of Peace bring peace to our hearts and peace in our lives, not just in this season, not just between now and Christmas and in the glow of Christmas lights and the festive celebrations that we have, but every day, every season, throughout our lives and into eternity. Amen.